Hi everyone, this video is going to be based on a painting. It's a little more difficult level, so it's meant to be more for the upper kids, but it's possible for the little ones to do it as well, especially if they had an adult sitting there and helping them with it. This one is going to be a dandelion painting with little dandelion puffs blowing off into the wind. So to make this project, you're going to need a white piece of paper, and you're going to need something that you can create a silhouette or like a black line with, and it cannot be a regular marker this time. It has to be either a Sharpie marker or a colored pencil or a black crayon, because you're going to be using watercolor paints or watercolor markers. I'll show you two different techniques to create that, and for that to work, you cannot have a regular marker which would just like move with the water. So black color pencil, black crayon, or Sharpie markers. My suggestion is always that you draw things out with a pencil first, so pencil and eraser if you need it, and then depending on what tools you have at home, markers or watercolor markers, which are just regular markers, not Sharpie markers, and then watercolor paints. If you have none of those available, you could always just use crayons and color it, or you could just do this as a black and white drawing with just the dandelions. So let's start out with the dandelions. I'm going to use a pencil first. Oh, and you're going to need a messy mat. So for the pencil part, I'm just going to draw my dandelion. So I'm going to draw a stem. At the end of the stem, I'm going to draw a circle. That's the dot for the middle of the dandelion. I'm going to show you how to create two different dandelions. One dandelion's easy, is just little lines that come out with circles at the end of them. And you don't want these to be perfectly straight lines. Things in nature are not perfectly straight. So you want the lines to come out and be a variety of different kind of shapes. And then I'm going to make longer ones. So I'm going to come in between all the short ones, and I'm making longer ones. Okay, so that's one dandelion to create. That's the easy dandelion, so that one would be easy even for the little ones to do. And then you would just trace over this with Sharpie or color pencil or crayon. All right, you get the idea. I'm not going to do the whole thing there for you. All right, let me show you a different dandelion. This one looks a little more realistic like a dandelion, but it is a little more difficult. So on this one then, and I'm just going to draw with Sharpie so it's easier for you guys to see. For this one then, I'm going to start with my middle dot, and then I'm going to make straight lines that kind of have these little, almost like little poofs at the end, little, like a dandelion has, a little poof. Think like a little fork. I'm going to go all the way around. I'm not trying to make the little poofs all have the exact amount or look exactly the same, because this is supposed to be from nature, which would not have perfectly straight lines. All right, and then I'm going to go in between all of those I just did, and I'm going to just do what we did on the first one, which is lines with a dot at the end of it. And that one looks a little more like an actual dandelion. And then I'm just going to create a stem that comes down. Notice I don't make the stems straight. I always make them slightly twisted or bent a little bit, just because that's the way a real dandelion stem would be. All right, and now we're going to make a little bit of the poofs like here that look like they're coming and blowing off like an actual dandelion. When you blow on it, they have those things that come off. So for this kind then, I would just do a line with a little seed, because that's the kind that would come off of that one, because that's what it looks like. This one though, I can do like that with the little poofs on it. And now we're done with the drawing part and you're ready to start the painting part. Now I'm going to show you two different techniques. So this one here, my example here, I used the regular markers. So I just use markers, okay? So all you do is you'll just take your markers and you'll color where you want them to go. Now you do not want to go over the flower, and you don't want to go over around the little head part of the actual dandelion poof, because that would be like where the white puffy part is. So we're leaving the white of the paper is where all of the white of the dandelion would be. And again, I have my messy mat under here so I can move it and get it on there, not going in the flower. Okay, so you would do that over the whole thing with the markers. So let me show you the technique with the markers then. And then all you need then is some water and a paintbrush. If you don't have a paintbrush, then you just use your finger. And you go over it. And because these are water markers, these are not permanent markers, the colors will start to blend and look kind of like a watercolor paint. See that? So that's one option, one way of doing it. Or you can just use watercolor paints if you have that available to you. And the watercolor paints, you can do some different techniques. You can make it look more watery. So if you look at my example that I did with the watercolor paints, see how I have this like watercolor mark, these watercolor marks. And how I did that is you first paint the paper with just water. Now this water is kind of tinted, but that's okay. You get it wet first, and then you go in with the paints you want. Like that. And then I would just go back in with some water, just plain water, and just kind of make some spots where it's more watery. And then when it dries, it's going to leave those spots. You can already kind of see them here. See how it's looking lighter right there? That's what's going to end up looking like that when it dries. Okay? So that's more of this technique. All right, guys, I hope everyone's staying well and you enjoy the nice weather outside, and that you are being kind to your parents. And I hope to see all of you soon. Bye.